Daniel stepped off the shuttle and into the great hall of Eloria, the capital city of the Veiri. The air shimmered faintly, filled with a soft glow that seemed to come from the crystalline walls themselves. Light refracted through towering spires, painting the chamber with colors no human sky had ever known. The Veiri moved with silent grace, their forms tall and slender, their skin glistening like polished glass under 1,000 suns. For a moment, Daniel forgot his mission. He simply stared, feeling as though he had walked into a dream. The humans had come as diplomats, not conquerors. Earth's leaders believed the Veiri were too advanced to be threatened, but also too distant to be allies unless someone reached across the silence. Daniel was chosen for his ability to adapt, to read expressions, to speak from the heart even when no words seemed enough. Now, standing among beings of crystal and symmetry, he felt very small. At the center of the chamber stood Kaelira, one of the Veiri envoys. She was taller than Daniel, her frame delicate yet commanding. Every angle of her body gleamed with perfection, as if sculpted from living quartz. Her eyes, faceted and deep, reflected not just light but the countless thoughts moving behind them. She approached without sound, her steps so smooth it seemed she floated. "Human Daniel," she said in a voice that was clear, almost musical, yet carried no warmth. "We welcome your presence on Eloria." Daniel bowed slightly. He had been trained in countless gestures of respect, but instinct told him to treat her not as a specimen of alien beauty, but as a person. He looked into her shimmering eyes, and before protocol could stop him, words slipped from his mouth, soft and almost reverent. "You're beautiful," he whispered. For a heartbeat, the hall froze. The Veiri standing nearby stopped moving, their crystalline skin catching the light in eerie stillness. Kaelira herself went rigid, her posture locked as though she had turned to stone. Her eyes widened not with pride or embarrassment, but with confusion. The word meant nothing in her language. It meant too much in his. Daniel realized what he had said and felt his chest tighten. He had not meant it as a move, not as flattery, but as truth. He wanted her to know that what he saw before him was not just precision of form, but something beyond it, something that touched the human heart. Yet he wondered if he had crossed a line, if his honesty had caused offense. Kaelira tilted her head, her gaze sharp and searching. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she studied him as though he were an artifact that had just broken every rule of science. Her silence stretched into the chamber, pulling the attention of every Veiri present. The other aliens whispered to one another in their high, melodic tones. Words flickered through the hall like fragments of glass. Daniel could not understand, but he felt the weight of their unease. To them, beauty was not something to be spoken of. Their society praised symmetry, order, and function. To acknowledge beauty with emotion was not a practice they followed. Finally, Kaelira spoke again, her voice steady but slower now, as if she were testing the sound of each word. "What does this mean, human Daniel? What do you intend when you say such a thing?" Daniel swallowed, searching for the right response. He could lie, dismiss it as a mistake in translation, but that would not be true to himself. He straightened his shoulders and answered with honesty. "It means that when I look at you, I see something that stirs the heart. Not just form, not just light, but a presence that feels remarkable." The chamber grew silent again. Kaelira did not move, but her eyes shifted slightly, reflecting new colors as though her crystalline form was touched by something unseen. She seemed unsettled yet curious. For the first time, her flawless composure cracked, not in a visible flaw, but in hesitation. Daniel held her gaze, not challenging, not pressing, but waiting. He knew he had offered something fragile, and fragility was powerful in its own way. Kaelira finally stepped back, her voice quiet but clear. "You speak strangely, human. No one has ever said such words to me. To us." She paused as though she were unsure if she should even continue. "I must consider what it means." Without another word, she turned and left the hall, her crystalline form catching the light as she vanished into the corridors beyond. The other Veiri murmured in tones of unease, their perfect faces unreadable. Daniel stood alone in the center, his words echoing in his mind. He had not planned it, yet somehow he knew it mattered. On a planet where perfection was law, a single human whisper had broken through centuries of silence. And somewhere deep within Kaelira, a question had been planted, one that no symmetry could answer. Kalara walked quickly through the long, crystal corridors of the great hall, her mind tangled with thoughts. The human's words echoed in her head again and again. "You're beautiful." The sound was simple, but the meaning was impossible to place. Her people, the Veyari, did not speak in such ways. To call something beautiful was not part of their language. They admired balance, symmetry, precision, and the perfection of polished form. A building was worthy when every angle aligned. A face was admired when every proportion matched flawless geometry. But to tie such things with feelings, to speak them aloud with warmth, was unheard of. Yet the human had looked at her with eyes that carried no calculation. His gaze did not measure symmetry. It did not weigh her worth as her people did. His tone was soft, almost fragile, as if he had given her a gift. And strangely, she had frozen as though she did not know how to receive it. She reached her chambers, a room filled with sharp lines and mirrored surfaces. Normally, the reflections gave her comfort, reminding her of her unbroken form. Today they unsettled her. She stared at her image and tilted her head slightly, searching for the flaw the human might have seen. But there was no flaw. She was as perfect as she had always been. Still, the words replayed. "You're beautiful." Kalara moved to the archives, a glowing sphere of memory crystals where knowledge of countless centuries was stored. She placed her hands on the smooth surface and streams of light poured upward, forming records of history, science, and culture. She searched for concepts of beauty tied to emotion. She found descriptions of form, diagrams of proportion, songs of harmony, but nowhere did she find words that matched what the human had spoken. Her unease grew deeper. Meanwhile, Daniel sat quietly in the guest quarters provided to the human delegation. He had been told that the Veyari were logical, distant, and bound by tradition, but no one had told him how fragile that balance felt when you introduced something small, something human. He had not meant to disrupt their ways. He had only spoken truth. To him, Kalara's presence was extraordinary, not only because of her crystalline form, but because of the strange calm and strength she carried. It had moved him, and the words had slipped out. Now he wondered if he had made a mistake. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. It was not a human, but another Veyari envoy. This one's form was taller, his surface gleaming like silver glass. His voice carried no warmth, only formality. "The envoy Kalara has withdrawn to her chambers. She requires time to consider your words." Daniel frowned. "Did I insult her?" The envoy tilted his head, faceted eyes reflecting light. "We do not understand insult in the way you mean. But your phrase, it unsettled her. You spoke of beauty as if it were truth. Among us, such things are not spoken. They are not felt." Daniel nodded slowly. "Among humans, beauty is not only seen, it is felt. It means something that touches the heart." The envoy studied him for a long time, then left without another word. Daniel sighed, realizing he was standing at the edge of something fragile, an entire culture he did not understand. Back in her chamber, Kalara sat at the mirrored table, her hands folded before her. She replayed the scene again in her mind. She remembered his tone, low and warm. She remembered the way his eyes did not judge. She tried to imagine speaking the same words to another Veyari. "You are beautiful." The thought felt heavy, almost dangerous. Why dangerous? Why could such a simple thing feel so large? She closed her eyes. A memory came. When she was younger, a small crack had appeared in her crystalline form after training. It had healed, but she remembered the shame of it, the whispers of others about her flaw. She remembered hiding, wishing the crack away. No one had called her beautiful then. No one ever would have. And yet the human had looked at her today as though even a flaw would not matter. Kalara rose suddenly and left her chambers. She needed to see him again, to ask him why he had spoken those words. Her steps echoed lightly as she moved through the silent corridors until she reached the human quarters. She paused outside his door, uncertain. No Veyari would ever seek such clarification, but her heart felt unsettled and she needed an answer. She touched the panel, and the door opened with a soft sound. Daniel looked up from his seat, surprised to see her. He stood quickly, his expression open, not guarded. "Kalara," he said gently. Her crystalline form caught the light, shimmering faintly as she hesitated. Finally, she asked, "Why did you speak those words to me? Why did you say, 'I am beautiful'?" Daniel studied her carefully. He could see she was not angry, only deeply confused. He chose his words with care. Because it's what I felt when I saw you. Humans don't only measure beauty by form. We see it in presence, in uniqueness, in the way someone makes us feel. It wasn't a trick or formality. It was the truth as I felt it. Kalira tilted her head, her eyes glimmering. She had never heard anyone speak of feelings tied to worth. Among her people, feelings were kept private, irrelevant. Yet this human spoke as though they were the most important measure of all. She did not reply immediately. She only stood there trying to understand. For the first time in her life, she realized that her people's knowledge did not contain all answers. And that realization frightened her more than anything. The following day, the great hall of Aloria filled again. Light spilled through the crystal walls, scattering soft rainbows across the floor. Delegates of both the Vaeri and humans gathered for another round of discussions. Daniel sat among his group, but his mind kept wandering to the moment with Kalira the night before. She had come to him with questions, her voice uncertain, her perfect composure unsettled. He had answered truthfully, but he knew his words had stirred something dangerous. Kalira entered the chamber with calm steps, her crystalline form gleaming as though nothing had changed. Yet inside her thoughts churned. She had not slept. The human's explanation, that beauty was not only symmetry but also something felt in the heart, played again and again in her mind. She tried to push it away, but it clung to her, reshaping how she looked at her world. As the meeting began, one of the senior Vaeri envoys spoke about trade agreements and energy exchanges. His voice was sharp and even, precise as always. Daniel listened politely, though most of the technical details were beyond him. He was here not for science, but for human presence. His leaders believed that sometimes diplomacy required warmth as much as knowledge. When Kalira's turn came to address the assembly, her voice was steady. But as she spoke, her eyes shifted toward Daniel for only a moment, and that single glance did not go unnoticed. Several Vaeri in the hall turned their heads slightly, the faintest ripple of curiosity running through them. Humans might have missed it, but Daniel saw it, and he felt the weight of it pressing silently around him. After the session, Kalira found herself walking near Daniel again. The hallways of Aloria shimmered with endless reflections, but today they seemed to watch her more closely than usual. She slowed her steps, letting the others pass until she and Daniel were walking side by side. "You still do not regret speaking those words?" she asked quietly, her tone low enough that the others would not hear. Daniel shook his head. "No, I meant them. I won't take them back." Kalira studied him carefully. "Among my people, such words carry no place. They are without meaning. Yet when you said them, I froze. I did not know how to answer." "Maybe that's because the meaning isn't in the word," Daniel said gently. "It's in the feeling. Humans use it because we want others to know how they affect us. It's not a calculation. It's something real in the heart." Kalira stopped walking, her crystalline skin catching the light like a prism. Her eyes held his, searching for a flaw in his explanation, something to dismiss. But she found none. His voice was calm, without trickery. He truly believed what he said. At that moment, another Vaeri envoy approached, one with silver facets and a sharper presence. His gaze swept between Kalira and Daniel. "Is something troubling you, Envoy Kalira?" he asked, his voice formal but edged with suspicion. Kalira straightened instantly. "Nothing troubling. We are exchanging perspectives, as is the purpose of this mission." The envoy's eyes lingered a moment longer on Daniel. Then he inclined his head and walked away. Daniel exhaled softly once the envoy had left. "I don't think your people like me much." Kalira turned back to him. Her voice softened, though her face remained composed. "They are cautious. They do not understand you, and what is not understood is often seen as dangerous." Later that evening, Kalira returned to her quarters. She could not rest. She found herself thinking not of her duties, but of the human strange idea of beauty. She remembered the faces of her people, so flawless and precise. She remembered the endless polished surfaces of Aloria. Everything had always been perfect, and yet somehow it had begun to feel empty. She thought of Daniel's fellow humans. One had a scar across his cheek, another limped slightly when he walked. Yet when they looked at one another, they smiled without shame. They treated each other with respect, even affection, as though such flaws were not flaws at all. The idea unsettled her. Could it be possible that perfection was not the highest truth? Could it be that what the humans carried, this way of seeing beauty in what was different, even broken, was a strength her people had ignored. The next day, Kalira tried something unusual. She stood before her mirror and tilted her form, searching not for perfection but for imperfection. She noticed a tiny shift in symmetry near her shoulder, so small she had never paid attention before. Instead of disgust, she forced herself to see it differently. She thought of the human's words, the way he had spoken with warmth. For a brief second she wondered, could even this small irregularity be beautiful? The thought frightened her, but it also lit something deep inside, something she could not push away. Meanwhile, whispers began to spread among the Veyari. Some envoys had overheard fragments of her exchanges with the human. They questioned why Kalira, so precise and flawless, would waste thought on a word that carried no weight. Others began to fear that the humans brought more than trade. They brought ideas that could break the balance of Aloria. Kalira sat alone in her chamber that night, light shimmering across her crystalline form. She thought of Daniel's eyes, steady and unafraid. She thought of the warmth in his voice, and she realized with a strange heaviness that she could no longer dismiss the word he had given her. "You're beautiful." The sound of it lingered in her mind. She did not know what it would mean for her people, but for herself it had already changed something she could never return from. Kalira began to notice the humans more closely. At first she told herself it was only part of her duty as an envoy. Observing visitors, learning their ways, this was expected. But she knew the truth. She wanted to understand them, not only as diplomats but as beings who carried something her people did not. She watched the way they moved when they thought no one was studying. She saw them laugh together at small things, gestures that seemed meaningless yet carried warmth. One human spilled water at the table, and instead of shame, the others smiled, even teased him lightly, and then helped to clean it. There was no perfection in their movements, but there was a lightness in their bonds. One day, as she passed by the training courtyard, she noticed two humans sparring for practice. One of them limped slightly, his movements uneven, yet the other encouraged him with a grin. When the spar ended, both were out of breath, laughing, their imperfections forgotten. Kalira stood in silence, unable to look away. Her people would never accept such imbalance. A cracked form was to be hidden. A limp would mean exile. Yet here, among humans, it meant nothing. Her thoughts returned again and again to Daniel. His words had been the seed, but it was not only his words. It was the way he carried himself, not flawless, not perfect, but honest. Whenever he spoke to her, his tone was steady, never cold, never harsh. It unsettled her, but it also pulled her closer to questions she could not silence. That evening, Daniel found her waiting in one of the quiet gardens of Aloria. The gardens were not like Earth's. Instead of trees and soil, they were filled with pillars of light, flowing streams of crystal dust, and silent sculptures shaped by the city's energy. Kalira stood among them, her figure glowing faintly. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, her voice softer than before. Daniel approached carefully. "Anything. Why do humans smile?" she asked. "I see it often. Even when there is no gain, no reason. You smile when something is not perfect. You smile when one of you falls or makes an error. Why?" Daniel smiled without meaning to, and she noticed at once. "Because sometimes imperfection is what makes us connect. It reminds us we are alive, that we are not machines. Smiling is a way of saying it's all right. You're still you. You still matter." Kalira tilted her head. "So flaws are not shameful to you?" "Not always," Daniel replied. "Sometimes they make us who we are. A scar tells a story. A mistake makes us learn. Even sadness can remind us of love. That's why when I saw you, I didn't just see symmetry. I saw something that felt alive. And that's why I said what I said." Kalira looked away, her crystalline skin shimmering under the garden's glow. She felt something stir inside, a quiet pull she could not name. For so long her people had taught her that worth was in perfection, that any flaw would break her. But Daniel's words kept telling her the opposite, that perhaps being alive was greater than being flawless. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound. Another Veyari envoy had entered the garden. His expression was unreadable, his form sharp and polished. He bowed lightly to Kalira but ignored Daniel. "Envoy Kalira, the council has noted your unusual interest in the humans. Some whisper that their ways may influence you." Kalira's form stiffened. "I am only fulfilling my role as envoy. Observing, learning." The envoy's eyes gleamed faintly. "Be cautious. Ideas can be more dangerous than QISR. And weapons. With that, he turned and left the garden, leaving a heavy silence behind. Daniel exhaled quietly. I think I might be causing you trouble. Kalira shook her head slowly. No, it is not only you. It is what you represent. Your people carry ways we do not understand. And perhaps, things we do not wish to understand. She walked away that night with her mind heavy. Yet as she returned to her chambers, she found herself standing before her mirror again. This time she did not look only for symmetry. She leaned closer, searching for the faint irregularity in her shoulder she had noticed before. Instead of recoiling, she placed her hand over it. She whispered, barely audible even to herself, "Maybe it is not weakness." The words felt strange on her tongue, but they did not leave her. The next day, the council gathered again. The air was tense. Several envoys had heard that Daniel had spoken of beauty, of flaws, of emotions. They argued quietly among themselves. Some dismissed humans as foolish dreamers. Others warned that such thoughts could unbalance their society. Kalira sat in silence, but inside she was no longer steady. She knew the human had planted a question too deep to erase, and though she feared what it could mean for her people, she also felt a strange freedom growing in her heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder. Perhaps perfection was not the highest truth. Perhaps beauty could exist even where symmetry did not. And if that were true, then everything she had ever believed might need to be seen in a new light. Kalira sat alone in her chamber long after the council had ended. The echoes of their voices still lingered in her mind. Words like dangerous and disruptive had been spoken, not about war or threats, but about something as small as human ideas. Never in her long service had she seen her people so unsettled. She touched the smooth surface of her table, her reflection shimmering back at her. She remembered Daniel's calm voice, his gentle way of explaining things her people never dared to consider. Beauty is not only form, it is what you feel in the heart. Those words had taken root inside her, and no matter how much she tried, she could not pull them out. But to let them grow was dangerous. Already, the other envoys whispered when she entered the room. She felt their eyes on her, sharp and judging. They saw the pause in her step, the way her gaze sometimes drifted toward the humans. They noticed the change in her. That night, Kalira stood before the mirror again. She examined her reflection carefully. Perfect symmetry looked back at her, every angle flawless, every proportion exact. Yet for the first time, perfection no longer gave her comfort. Instead, it felt heavy like a cage. She leaned closer, tracing the tiny irregularity in her shoulder she had once tried to ignore. She stared at it for a long time. A quiet thought rose in her. What if this is part of who I am? What if even this is beautiful? The thought frightened her, but it also warmed her. It was a warmth she had never known from perfection. The next morning, Kalira walked through the city with Daniel beside her. The council had allowed the humans to tour Aloria, though always under watch. The crystalline towers rose high above them, shining with faultless order. Every surface reflected the same flawless design. Daniel looked around with awe. It's incredible, he said softly. So precise, so perfect, but... He hesitated, then added, sometimes too perfect feels empty. Kalira turned to him quickly. Empty? He nodded. Back on Earth, the most beautiful places aren't always perfect. A mountain has rough edges, but it feels alive. A flower has petals that bend in different ways, but that's what makes it special. Perfection can be impressive, but imperfection makes us connect. It feels real. Kalira walked in silence, his words sinking deep. Her people would never say such things, yet she felt the truth in them. When they reached the plaza, several young Veyari passed by. They moved with flawless posture, their forms shining with balance. But Kalira's eyes caught on one among them, a youth whose crystalline surface had a faint crack near the arm. It was small but clear. The others walked slightly ahead, pretending not to notice. The cracked one lowered their gaze, trying to hide. Kalira slowed her steps. She remembered her own small crack long ago, the shame she had felt, the whispers. Her heart tightened. For the first time, she did not feel judgment. Instead, she felt something else, something closer to Daniel's way of seeing. Later that evening, Kalira could not rest. She sat with Daniel in a quiet corner of the hall. The light from the walls washed gently over them. She spoke in a low voice. I do not know who I am anymore. My people have always told me that perfection is the only truth, that flaws are weakness, but now when I look at myself I see differently, and when I look at others, I see things I cannot unsee. Daniel listened carefully. It sounds like you're beginning to see the way we do. That's not weakness, Kalira. That's growth. She turned her gaze toward him, her eyes shimmering. But what if it tears me apart? What if it tears my people apart? Already they whisper about me. They see that I have changed, and change is feared here. Daniel's voice was calm. Change is always feared at first, but sometimes one person's change can show others a new path. Kalira closed her eyes. His words steadied her, yet the fear inside did not vanish. She felt torn between two worlds, her people's laws and the strange freedom the human had given her. The next day the council met again. This time the topic was not trade but whispers of discontent. A younger Veyari had been found hiding because of a crack in their form. Some argued they should be exiled as tradition demanded. Others argued the humans were influencing them, making them question their ways. Kalira sat silently, her heart pounding. She looked at the young one with the crack, standing in the center of the hall with lowered gaze. She remembered Daniel's smile, his words about scars and flaws. She remembered the warmth she had felt when she whispered to herself, "Maybe it is not weakness." Her hands tightened against her seat. Inside her, a storm raged. She wanted to speak, but speaking would mean crossing a line she could never return from. Yet silence felt heavier than words. When the session ended, Kalira left quickly, her crystalline form glowing faintly in the light. She walked into the night of Eloria, her thoughts too loud to silence. For the first time in her life, she felt trapped not by flaws, but by perfection, and she knew soon she would have to choose between the order of her people and the truth she was beginning to see through human eyes. The council chamber was quiet, more so than usual. Kalira walked in with steady steps, though her heart thumped beneath her crystalline surface. Today, the matter before the council was urgent. A young Veyari, barely more than a child, had been discovered with a crack in their crystalline arm. Tradition demanded immediate exile. It was a simple rule. Flaws were weakness. Weakness was dishonor. Dishonor could not be allowed. The other envoys took their seats, faces polished and unreadable. Whispers moved through the room like currents of light, some disapproving, some curious. Daniel followed Kalira into the chamber, silent but present. His human presence had become a quiet support for her, though the council's eyes never left her. Kalira looked at the young Veyari, their form trembling slightly, eyes lowered to the floor. She remembered her own small crack from years ago, the shame she had felt, and the secret longing for someone to see beyond it. The memory pressed heavily against her chest. When the council began speaking, Kalira listened in silence. One envoy argued, "The rules exist to preserve our people. Imperfection cannot be tolerated. To allow it is to invite chaos." Another spoke more cautiously, "Yet humans are here. They see differently. Perhaps there is knowledge in this new way." Kalira's thoughts immediately turned to Daniel. She thought of his words, "A scar tells a story. A mistake makes us learn." She felt a quiet courage rising inside her, one she had never felt before. Her hand tightened on the edge of the table, and she knew what she had to do. She rose from her seat, every movement deliberate. "I will speak," she said, her voice clear. It carried through the chamber, silencing even the whispers. All eyes turned to her. "This young Veyari," she began, looking at the child, "is not broken. This crack is not shame. It does not make them less worthy of respect. It does not make them less capable." A murmur ran through the council. Some envoys' eyes narrowed. Some whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable. Kalira's voice remained steady. "In our pursuit of perfection," she continued, "we forget that value exists beyond form. The humans have taught me something that I cannot ignore. Life is not only about symmetry or flawlessness. It is about presence, courage, and the light within each being." The chamber fell silent. No one spoke for a long moment. The young Veyari raised their eyes, uncertain but hopeful, and Kalira's gaze met theirs. She saw relief, a fragile trust that she would not abandon them. One of the senior envoys finally spoke, his tone measured. "Envoy Kalira, you are challenging centuries of law and tradition. Are you aware of the consequences?" Kalira nodded. "I am aware, and I am willing to face them, because what I have learned cannot be ignored. This child, like all of us, is worthy of acknowledgement. Their life is not defined by a crack. It is defined by their courage, by their existence, by the truth of who they are. Daniel watched silently, pride and quiet awe in his eyes. Kalira's words carried the strength of someone who had seen a truth that her people had never recognized. The council deliberated for hours. Whispers and heated debates filled the chamber, some arguing that tradition must be upheld, others quietly influenced by Kalira's courage and the human perspective. Finally, the head of the council spoke, his voice firm but softer than usual. Envoy Kalira has presented a perspective we cannot ignore. While tradition values perfection, life is more than rules. This young Vayari will not be exiled. Instead, they will be allowed to remain, under observation and guidance. A collective gasp moved through the chamber. Some envoys looked shocked, some relieved, others unsure of what this meant for their society. The young Vayari blinked, overwhelmed, and then bowed to Kalira with gratitude so deep it touched everyone present. Kalira felt a strange lightness inside her. She had taken a step no Vayari had taken before, and the world had not ended. The young one's survival was proof that life could be more than rigid rules, more than fear of imperfection. Later, as Kalira walked through the quiet corridors with Daniel, she allowed herself a rare smile. "I feared the consequences," she admitted softly, "but it seems the world did not collapse." Daniel laughed gently. "Sometimes the strongest changes are the ones that feel impossible. You gave them something far greater than protection. You gave them acknowledgement, acceptance, and courage." Kalira looked at him, her eyes reflecting a faint shimmer of light. "And you showed me that words can hold power beyond our understanding." Daniel reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "Words, actions, sometimes they are all it takes to shift a perspective. Even the smallest change can ripple through an entire world." Kalira considered this. Her crystalline form had always reflected light perfectly, but now it seemed to glow from within, a quiet illumination born of understanding and bravery. She realized she had crossed a line she could never return from. She had seen the world differently, and she could not unsee it. That night, as she returned to her chambers alone, she stood before the mirror. Her reflection was still flawless, but something had changed. The tiny imperfection in her shoulder no longer felt shameful. Instead, it seemed alive, carrying the story of the day, the courage she had found, and the knowledge that life was more than symmetry. A quiet voice whispered in her mind, one she could not forget. "You're beautiful." The words belonged to Daniel, but now they echoed differently. Truth recognized, strength affirmed. She smiled, a small but certain smile, for she knew that in protecting another, she had discovered her own value beyond perfection, beyond fear. And for the first time, Kalira felt fully, undeniably free. The city of Eloria shone like crystal under the twin suns, every surface reflecting light in countless directions. Kalira walked through the halls with a sense of calm she had never known before. The council had accepted her words. The young Vayari had been spared, and whispers of change floated quietly among her people. Still, she knew that not all minds were open yet. Tradition ran deep, and fear of imperfection lingered in the air like a shadow. Daniel walked beside her, silent and steady. He did not need to speak. His presence alone reminded her of the courage she had discovered, the warmth of acceptance that existed outside rigid rules. They reached the gardens, where streams of crystal dust flowed and pillars of light swirled like liquid stars. Kalira paused and looked around, letting the calm of the place fill her. She had spent countless hours here before, analyzing, observing, seeking perfection. Now she felt something different. She felt alive. She felt free. Daniel's voice broke the quiet. "You did more than you realized today." Kalira turned to him. "I only spoke what I felt was right." He shook his head. "It was more than right. You changed their world without using power or force. You gave them the gift of seeing differently." She considered his words, her mind reflecting on everything she had learned. Humans saw beauty differently. They saw value in uniqueness, in life itself. Kalira had always believed that perfection defined worth, but now she knew that worth existed beyond symmetry, beyond flawless form. A faint smile touched her lips.
"I can still feel their eyes watching me,"
she admitted. "I know some do not agree. Some will never agree." Daniel nodded. "That's true of every change. But you have started something important. Ideas are stronger than fear, stronger than rules. You have planted a seed, Kalira. She looked at him, her crystal form catching the light glowing softly from within. For a moment she did not see herself as flawless, nor did she worry about judgment. She saw herself as alive, capable, and brave. And in that reflection she saw beauty, real beauty that needed no perfection. They walked together in silence for a while, watching the streams of light dance across the gardens. Kalira noticed other Veari passing by. Some glanced at her with quiet respect, others with curiosity, and a few with suspicion. The balance of their society was shifting slowly, subtly, and she felt the weight of being part of that change. Later, as the twin suns began to set, casting long prisms of light through the city, Kalira and Daniel found a quiet balcony overlooking the crystalline plains. The view was breathtaking, but it no longer intimidated her. It felt like a mirror of what she had learned. Perfection could be admired, but life was more beautiful in its complexity. Daniel turned to her and spoke softly. "Kalira, I want to tell you something again." Her eyes met his, steady now, no longer frozen by confusion or fear. "Yes?" He leaned closer, his voice gentle but clear. "You're beautiful." This time Kalira did not freeze. She did not need to think about it. She felt it, not as judgment, not as calculation, but as truth. Her heart, long hidden behind layers of duty and tradition, opened. The warmth of his words touched her, a simple recognition of what she already knew deep inside. A soft laugh escaped her lips, and Daniel smiled in return. The garden seemed to shimmer brighter, the air lighter, as if the city itself acknowledged the quiet miracle of understanding. Kalira looked out over the plains. The young Veari she had defended earlier had begun training again, unafraid. Their presence now a symbol of hope. Others had begun to watch, to consider, to question what perfection truly meant. Kalira knew it would take time, but she also knew that her actions had planted a seed that could grow into something remarkable. Turning back to Daniel, she realized something profound. Humanity had touched her world not with weapons or rules, but with words and understanding. A single phrase, spoken from honesty and heart, had unlocked a perspective that even centuries of tradition could not teach. Her crystalline form shimmered in the sunset, not as a mirror of flawlessness, but as a reflection of life itself, resilient, radiant, and free. She had learned that beauty was not about being unbroken, but about embracing what one truly was. Daniel reached for her hand, and she took it without hesitation. In that simple gesture, worlds collided and merged, not through force, but through understanding. Kalira smiled once more, a true, heartfelt smile that carried all she had discovered: courage, freedom, acceptance, and the quiet joy of being seen. The city of Aeloria continued to shine, yet now it shone differently. Its light no longer only reflected symmetry and perfection. It reflected life, understanding, and the promise that even the smallest words could change a world. And Kalira knew, as she stood beside the human who had taught her to see beyond perfection, that this was only the beginning. For the first time, she did not fear the future. She welcomed it.